Salutators, my potats, it is I, Rave, and I am back with another episode of Read with Rave, a series in which I read books or short stories written by myself or by some of my friends. A couple of small disclaimers. Disclaimer number 1, I have already gotten permission from my friends to read their books or short stories so as to avoid copyright. That being said, I will have links to their social media down in the description below. Disclaimer number 2, these books and short stories are not meant for children. The average audience is teens or young adults, so if you are a young child, please jump off this video and return when I have gaming or art videos. Today, I will be reading The Crossroads Planet, Book 1 of the Crossroads series by Robert Field. Chapter 4. Back at the inn, she was accosted by Jack, the innkeeper, as she picked up her key. "There's someone wants to see thee real bad. Seems to be real worried about thee. Over by the bar," he said gruffly, and turned away. Surprised, she walked over into the saloon, the evening's crowd not yet gathered, when out of a booth popped Lance. Crystal must have made quite an expression, for his face changed too. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle thee like that. I've been worried about thee. After thee passed out at the dance, I went to look for a healer that I could trust, given the hour of the feasting. When I got back, thee had gone. Where did thee go?" "Well," began Crystal, "after I came to, I thought to go back to my room. Then I tripped over something and an old woman helped me, Marte." "Marte? She's a nice old lady. Minorly talented, but very caring. Never took up the vocation, but decided to run a small business instead. Well, Marte thought that I might be affected by spirit winds, and took me to see Mistress Amber." "Mistress Amber? Even my master treads lightly in her presence. What did she say?" "She said her stone had never quivered so, and that she didn't feel qualified to teach me." Lance frowned. "And I thought she was the best in the circle. Well, girl, thee must be talented, unlike me. Amber turns away students because she hasn't the time to teach them all. Those with lesser talent, like me, she pawns off on the other masters. She's headmaster at the school, after all. But to not feel qualified to teach thee, now there's a kicker." He paused and took a large sip from his ale. "Sorry, forgetting my manners. May a humble student offer thee aught to drink?" Crystal nodded. "Some mulled cider, if they've got some. Had some last night that didn't agree with me in the state I was in then, but I can assure you that I'm feeling much better tonight." Lance turned toward the bar. "Lucy, some mulled cider from a lady here." Crystal smiled. "Oh, you talk so graciously, like I was a princess or something." "Can't help it. Upbringing and all that. My parents drilled me in my manners most thoroughly, although for these so, well, graceful, that it just seems to come naturally." "I don't know. What could anyone possibly see in me?" Girl, thy good looks aside, and don't say thee hasn't got them. Well, Amber is right. Not that she's ever wrong. But I saw something in thee as well. Not sure what it was, but it had me chasing thee all evening. Now thee's here, and I trust I shall not lose thee so easily this time." "Well, you're more than you claim to be yourself. Apprentice assistant healer? I think you've got more in you than that. After all, you did ease my discomfort back at the dance." What? I just saw thee looked a little unsteady and wanted to steady thee a bit, that's all." "Well, after you touched me, my head felt rather better, and I'd been feeling the oddest sensations ever since leaving landing. I felt relief and something else as well. A sort of warmth." He looked at her. "It can only be the influence of the spirit winds that makes thee feel ill. Thee has the ken, and if Amber feels unable to train thee to thy fullest potential, it must be a great potential indeed." "So she says. She gave me some lessons today on grabbing individual filaments of the spirit winds. I got pretty good at it, too, though I'm not sure how much of it was her facilitating me versus my own skill. From what I understand from a single session with her during which she evaluated my potential, she is not easy on students. I should think that after an hour or two at a single exercise that it would be thee doing it alone, and she just watching, I suspect." "Well, how did you do?" "I just tensed up and couldn't perform well at all. Eventually, she said that I was material for one of the lesser masters, and no more. I'm just a failure, that's all." Crystal placed her hand on his. "I don't think you're a failure." Calmly, she met his gaze, feeling the warmth rising in her cheeks. Nothing was said for the space of several heartbeats, when suddenly the spell was broken as a steaming glass was set on the table between them. Suddenly embarrassed, she snatched her hand back and clutched at her cider for want of something to hold. I don't know what came over me just then. It isn't the spirit winds, for since my lesson they've ceased to bother me so. I've an idea what it could have been, Lance replied, and reached out to clasp her other hand in his. Seriously, though, I've got quite a lot of questions to ask thee, and maybe some things to tell thee as well. 'Tis not the best place here for such talk, seeing as the wrong ears might hear something. Best we go outside the inn entirely. So drink up thy cider like a good girl, and let us go to my place. The universe spun around Crystal's head, and it wasn't the spirit winds either. Boys had ogled her before, but this just wasn't in the same category at all. She finished her cider while he finished his ale, then both arose. Pausing to adjust her cloak, she shyly stretched an arm out to him, and, heart pounding, she stole out into the cool of the evening with Lance. Around the square a couple strode. The girl was resplendent in her cloak, faintly purple in the twilight, flushed face partially hidden by hood and hair. The gentleman's golden cape accented his dark green tunic and long cream-colored hose. They held each other closely, the girl shyly and the man protectively. Skirting the square, Lance led Crystal several streets back. This evening was as calm and cool as the previous had been overheated and disturbed. They walked slowly along, drinking in each other's presence wordlessly. The paved streets near the center of the town gave way to rude paths. Finally, they stepped off the path entirely and into a small grove. Beyond, a murmur of sound indicated the presence of a river. A cool mist was just rising up. In the midst of the grove, he stopped and turned to face her. Lance's heart pounded as he summoned up the words to say and the courage to say them. Rather than blurt out a half-composed thought, he simply stared into her eyes. She stared evenly back. His feelings for her were getting him all muddled, and for once that wasn't how he wished to feel towards a girl. The girl was a mystery to him. She seemed to see something in him, but what could she see that Mistress Amber and the other masters had sought for and failed to find? Still composing his thoughts, he guided her by the elbow to a thicket where they could sit against opposing tree trunks, comfortably tete-a-tete. They resumed gazing into each other's eyes. Her gaze was getting decidedly dreamy, and his thoughts were getting more muddled than ever. At last he drew a breath and jumped in. Crystal, I know this isn't my place, and it's not what thee's thinking. I wanted a place where we could talk as long as we wanted, undisturbed, and I've got some rather noisy neighbors at the college. I don't think Mistress Amber is telling thee everything, though I think she is giving to complete forthrightness in the whole. What has the mistress told thee exactly? Amber told me that these are troubled times for this planet, and that I was their last great hope, or something like that, and that if I would promise to save your collective skins, then she would teach me what little she could and then pass me along to her mentor for the advanced training. She closed her mouth, sat back against her tree trunk, and resumed the same dreamy stare. He relaxed and felt just a little dreamy himself. Rather than respond immediately, he looked up at the moon, just past full, rising in the eastern sky above the trees. The mistress is right, he said at last. There is some trouble brewing down south, around the capital city. Some grave misuse of the spirit winds is afoot. A powerful magus has arisen, and a company of minor talents that he has trained himself, and he's holding a large territory in thrall. The masters at the college, well, they have gotten too old or too set in their ways, or just don't think that they can deal with this nuisance. Even Amber is affected. Perhaps that is why she feels unable to train thee properly. Whatever the reason, too many people are feeling powerless. Even if that is not the case, there is no need for thee to lose heart as well. I think that Amber is hoping that thee, an outsider, will have the guts to step in where others feel unqualified. Crystal smiled, rather prettily in the moonlight. I hope that I don't let anyone's hopes down at that. I hope, though, that I wouldn't have to face this magus alone. You'll be there too, won't you? She inquired sweetly, with an entreating look that threatened to make his heart melt. He looked startled. Just how much does she see in me? Could she be right? She was talking again. You didn't bring me here just to talk, did you? He took her hand, gently this time. Her eyes really did look beautiful in the moonlight, framed by her wavy locks, sending his inner walls crashing down. As he bent over her, she turned her face up to his. As their lips touched, a strange sensation passed through his entire body, leaving behind an unexpected warmth. He held her tightly and willed the moment not to end. Like looking through the wrong end of the telescope, he suddenly felt small against the vastness of the universe, but Crystal's presence beside him felt perfectly large. Time seemed compressed, and he cherished each individual heartbeat in a sweet eternity for a single moment. At last they broke. She turned around to snuggle close beside him, but kept staring into his eyes. Eventually she shivered, and his mind came back to reality with a start. He glanced around. The moon was high in the sky, and the evening's cool had been replaced by night's chill. Well, aren't we a pair of moonstruck lovers? Didn't mean we should stay out so long. Best we be getting back now. She seemed to think about that for a second. Well, it has been an eventful day, and this little grove seemed so quiet, so peaceful. Mother would never approve, though. Thy mother halfway to Galactic Center by now, and won't be back for 6 months. I'm safe for now. Heavens, the girl is beginning to babble now. Is she colder than she looks? Is thee cold, lass? Mayhap thee's used to shipboard. Mayhap, she replied, with a laugh that turned into a giggle. The hour is getting late. Think it's too late to get into the Dead Horse tonight. Thee did know they bolt the doors at midnight? I don't recall hearing that. I'm never up that late. Well, thee is now, and I'm afraid it's my fault. The college has a back door that I know'll be open, and thee does not mind chambering with me tonight. She shivered again. I guess I must impose on thee. She made a face. This backwoods planet talk kind of rubs off on you, doesn't it? She smiled prettily again, seeming a little embarrassed, but mostly pleased. He arose and gave her a hand up, and they began walking back towards town. The college is not in the town properly, but is actually out this way, he said as they diverted from their original path. It's one reason why I like that grove. It's secluded, but fairly convenient to the campus. The College of Magic is part of the university, but not on the main campus. It'd be on the other side of town. Guess they felt it should be isolated somewhere. Just can't trust those magic power types, can they? Crystal solemnly drank up his words with a particularly rapt expression on her face. This hasn't been just another date, he thought. Do I dare let her know my reputation? He thought as another worry crossed his mind. Well, if she thinks I'm a true gentleman, I guess I don't dare disappoint her. Out of the shadows ahead of them, a wall loomed. The path they were on debouched into a small clearing, where set into the wall was a door. Lance tugged at the bell cord beside the door, and the bell rang somewhere within. After a moment, a small slit opened in the door, and 2 sleepy eyes peered out. No, it's just Lance, a voice was heard to say, and then came the sound of bolts being drawn, followed by the opening of the door itself. Evening, Lance, said a rather sleepy-looking guard. Not thy usual light skirt, eh? Lance blushed a deep purple, while Crystal looked somewhat confused. Lance seized the moment to propel both of them down the doorless corridor, and in a moment they emerged onto a moonlit road which turned and climbed around a medium hill, passing through a wide belt of shrubbery, then swung around to a small door in the corner of an inner wall. The door stood open and unattended. Through the door was a level yard with a cart path that led away into the distance. Diverging onto a smaller path, Lance led the way directly to where a large building loomed. A small door led to a passage which exited into a courtyard. It was surrounded by tall walls, variously taken up by windows, balconies, and railed galleys. Some of the windows showed that the midnight oil was being burned. This is the students' court. They quickly crossed the court to some stairs and went up several flights, emerging on an upper gallery looking the court, which led to an interior passage where Lance unlocked a door. Welcome to my humble quarters. I am afraid that all I have to offer are cold food and drink at this hour, as firewood is not issued until later this season. And anyway, I haven't a kettle. In some ways, I think that students really get the short end of the branch here. The students' court are all drafty rooms, cold galleries, and unheated passages. He checked his babble, as Crystal didn't seem to be hearing too much of what he was saying, but simply stared about her thoughtfully, at his books, his desk, and the minor decorations he had managed to accumulate. She seemed particularly curious about the chart given him by one of the masters depicting various components of the spirit winds. Despite her curiosity, she was still blinking sleepily. Well, perhaps some sleep is what thee needs most now. Thee can have my bed for the night, and I'll sleep on the couch in the outer room. She nodded sleepily, too tired and otherwise dazed to argue. Crystal awoke to glorious sunshine all around her. She did a double take. This wasn't her bed at the inn. Then she began to remember. The events of the past evening came back to her one by one. She alternately smiled and frowned in turn. The latest turn of events surely complicated things, if nothing else did. She really knew so little about the boy she'd fallen in with. He seemed the perfect gentleman, yet little things nagged at her. Shaking off her worries for the moment, she sat up. A quiet snore from the outer room suggested that Lance was still asleep after last night's latest tryst. She looked around the room, amazed. He complains about the accommodations? She thought incredulously. A large wardrobe sat against one wall, and next to it was a squat dresser with a mirror on the wall above it. In a corner sat a chair with her cloak neatly folded on it, and her belt with its pouch neatly coiled on top. The sunshine on the cloak made it appear a really bright blue. At least he's not a slob, whatever else he may be. She was sure that she'd been too sleepy last night to do more than throw herself on the bed. She stood up and appraised herself in the mirror. Not too bad after a midnight outing. She fetched toilet articles from her pouch and was straightening her appearance when the sound of a bell somewhere on the campus startled her. A wake-up bell? Evidently so, for there was a knock on the door. She opened it, and there stood Lance, looking none the worse for the late evening before. I always wake to the first bell. It's habit and necessity. Breakfast will be in half an hour. These shouldn't have any trouble getting in with me. The occasional guest does not upset the staff. Another odd piece of trivia to fit in the complex picture building in her mind, yet fitting in all the same. Sunshine lit up the couch in the sitting room. Crystal sat down to enjoy the warmth. Evidently, Lance had the same idea, for he sat down beside her. I hope thee's not too sore at me after last night. I feel like I might have led thee on a little, or be going a little too fast for thee. No, it was wonderful, she said. It's fine, really. It's just that I'm so confused about so many other things that I don't know what to think. You're the one comfort I've got right now. I'm new to romance, really, having led a sheltered shipboard life. I thought I'd get away from my parents and see the universe some. Admittedly, romance is not what I originally had in mind, but right now it's the most concrete thing I've got. Your presence is the most familiar thing in an unfamiliar world. I've read a lot of romance stories. I mean, what girl hasn't? You'll pardon me if I only know the storybook version of things and not the reality. Relax, my darling. May I call you that? Thee has rather set my world on its ear, too. I've had suffered a string of rather tawdry encounters that can hardly be dignified with the title of romance. Girls just seem to want to throw themselves at my feet, that's all. But thee? Thee is a pretty girl, true. Most of them are, yet thee is different somehow. Thee is inexperienced, which is not a fault, let me hasten to assure thee, and while thee seems interested in me, thee does not seem bent on a quick fling. He paused, and Crystal took her turn talking. Really, I do think I see something in you. I don't care what your instructors think. There must be some potential in you. I can just feel it. Sit still for a moment. She shut her eyes. This was the first time she tried this away from Amber, and she hoped it would work. The filaments of the spirit winds came dimly into view, but there weren't as many of them as in Amber's workroom. But they did seem affected, not only by her presence, but by Lance's. She opened her eyes again. I don't think you have anything to worry about. I may be just starting my training, but I am sure that I sense some greater potential in you. Well, I must admit that I haven't told thee everything, Lance replied. I had a meeting with the dean prior to the feasting, and I'm to have a new master, one who, along other masters, seems to think that I might make something of myself. I knew it! I just knew it! Crystal exclaimed. So not everyone is blind to your nature, least of all me. Just how powerful is thee? He gasped. I really could not tell you. I only know what Amber has said, and from what you have said, I'm guessing that she hasn't told me everything either. Lance considered a moment. I'm surprised she hasn't asked thee to enroll in the college. I must talk to Oliver about it. Mistress Amber may be the headmistress of the college, but the dean has a stronger say in admissions as well. Really, I don't think it's fair for Amber to keep thee out of the college. The Dead Horse is not the place for thee. In fact, thee might even get a scholarship if thy skills have the potential at all to be of value. I don't know. It's just all so confusing, she said, and snuggled up close to him. Hold me, she murmured. They were still cuddling on the sofa when the bell sounded again. That's the breakfast bell. Come, let's get some while it's hot. He opened the door to the passage and they stepped out. Exiting the courtyard by a different door, Lance led the way up a sloping lawn into a narrow passage between two buildings, one of which was obviously a kitchen, then entered the other larger building, emerging into a large hall. This is the Great Hall, used for students and staff dining in shifts. The masters and ranking faculty have their own dining facility away from this one. I must warn you about mealtimes here. As soon as the food is served, silence is expected, and someone gives some sort of lecture. Lately, it's all been politics and duty to one's planet. Rather unappetizing, I know. He found them seats at a table, food was brought, and a rather nondescript speaker rose at one side of the room to begin a long talk full of platitudes and proverbs, which Crystal hardly listened to. Rather, she was encompassed in her own thoughts, which were badly in need of sorting out. Mealtime was mercifully short, and Lance escorted her out of the dining hall by a large, different door. They emerged into sunlight. Crossing a wide lawn, they entered a small side building, passing through into a small courtyard. This is the master's court. The dean's rooms are here too. I would like to have a word with him and see if he could interview thee. Thee doesn't mind, does thee? No, I think it's wonderful that you're trying to help me. I just hope that the dean is willing to be convinced. Mrs. Amber isn't his boss or something like that. Nay, they be peers, and generally work in different spheres. He led her into a well-appointed outer office. Sit here, I won't be long, Lance said as he knocked the inner door, then shortly opened the door and went in, closing the door behind him. After several minutes he appeared. Go on in, the dean is expecting thee. Crystal rose and entered the inner office while Lance closed the door behind her. She was alone in the dean's office. An elder gentleman arose from behind a desk. So thee is Crystal, he said in a gravelly voice. I have heard much about thee, and not all from thy young friend who brought thee here. Thee is an enigma to us. I am just sorry that Amber did not bring thee here sooner. Amber is old and set in her ways, and sometimes thinks she can run the whole show to suit herself. I mean no disrespect to the mistress's talents, but she is not in charge of the college, merely the masters. But enough of our organizational woes. I would very much like for thee to enroll immediately in the College of Magic. The Council of Deans would be pleased to offer thee an immediate scholarship and stipend for thy trouble. I am given to understand that Mistress Amber was all in favor of shipping thee off to some backwoods sorceress who merely happens to be her personal mentor. I am sorry to contradict her, but I do believe that we have the finest cadre of teaching masters on the planet on this campus right here. He paused and looked apologetic. Forgive me, the urge to lecture runs deep. Thee has patiently heard me out. Pence for thy thoughts. Crystal considered. Well, Lance certainly warmed me to the idea of studying on campus, and I am certainly inclined to accept it in favor of gallivanting off into the Badlands. I would like to know more about what the situation is and why everyone is looking at me like I'm their great savior come riding into town. The old man looked slightly stricken. Has thee no heard of the troubles our planet be facing? Thee has a great Latin skill. Thee cannot go off planet, and thee must be taught ere thee be of any use. I do not say thee be our last best hope. What I do say is that thee be good enough that we want thee on our side. Can thee no understand it? I understand it well enough. I also know that I'm confused enough. I think that I need a chance to absorb the information I've gotten so far. I agree to be enrolled here, however, I must beg your indulgence while I become steeped in your culture. I trust that I may have the chance to come to you with questions periodically while I adjust? Aye, certainly. Well, if thy young gentleman hasn't strayed too far, perhaps he would be so kind as to escort thee to the registrar. Crystal smiled and made her exit. The outer room was empty, so she proceeded out into the passage. She looked around and saw Lance waiting. She ran to him. That was grueling, she cried. What? Master Oliver is a nice old chap. I know him well. I mean, I was maintaining a front. I'm so confused, but I didn't want to let him down. I accepted his offer of enrollment. We should be going to the registrar. We will, but first thee needs to relax. Sit in the garden with me for a moment. Lance led the way into the middle of the courtyard, which indeed was a garden, repleted with trees, shrubs, rocks, and small paths and benches. Lance guided the way to a bench in a secluded cul-de-sac around the rocks and bushes. When they had sat down, he carefully addressed her. Crystal, I think thee is worrying too much. I'm glad thee agreed to be enrolled here. In fact, it makes me happier than words to know that thee will be right here, and I don't just say that because of the growing relationship between us. I also say, let the relationship grow. Thee is important to me in a number of ways, and I hope that we will be together for some time yet, and thee does be willing. I can also say that the college is entertaining similar hopes with regard to thy career in magic, and I concur in these hopes. Crystal attempted the impossible, trying to look pleased and downcast at the same time. That's just it. The great gotcha. Everybody is pleased to see me and hopes I'll stay as long as I perform. Chris, thee's wrong, dead wrong. I, for one, will not spurn thee. And thee fails in thy magic endeavors, I will remain at thy side. The college, too, will not fail thee. The scholarship is real, the stipend is real. If thy magic talents do not come to fruition, thee will be allowed to continue with a more conventional education. Thee must be interested to know that the conventional education continues along with the magical anyway. If I fail magically, will I be able to remain at the campus? Chris, stop thinking about failure for a moment. I'm sure arrangements would be made, but I don't think thee'll fail. Thee will fail for sure if thee lets failure be thy first thing on thy mind always. All of a sudden, Crystal burst out laughing. All right, you win, and by the way, bravo, for a first-rate speech from Mr. Failure himself, the apprentice healer's assistant. She clapped her hands and made a mock bow, then ducked as he tried to cuff her right ear. Thank thee, and thee's right. I'd better let up on myself as well. Off to the register? Off! Thank you for joining today's episode of Read with Rave. I apologize for my stumbling, but I'm working on reading better, so I appreciate your patience. If you liked, please comment down below if you want me to do more of these, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to splash the bell icon so you never miss another video, and I will catch you all on the next wave. Bye!